Hi, today is another lesson for dear Mr. Kilmer. Okay, this lesson is for characters. First of all, let's look at Richard Knight. Okay, look at his some details about him. So he's 15 years old. He lives in Iowa. He was in the 10th grade and the youngest child. Okay, I prefer to use past tense because it is easier for students to write later on in their exam. Okay, physical description. Okay, tall, slender, and pale. He has blonde hair. He look like his mother. Okay, this is the page where you can find the statement that he looked like his mother. Okay, he lost his mother when he was 7 years old. Now let's look at the characteristics and the evidence or elaboration. First of all, Richard is hardworking, diligent, or helpful. Okay, in the exam, you can use the word is when you are describing his traits or characteristic, but in the events or the evidence from the novel, it is better to use past tense. Richard did twice the amount of work on the farm that Gus did. Okay, number two, Richard helped his sister in the kitchen after supper. And in school, Richard worked hard and got excellent grades in his studies. When Richard got home from school, he did his chores, gathered the eggs, and pitched hay to the horses. During summer, Richard spent his time on the farm plowing, planting, and cultivating. He also took care of animals. He loved working with his father. So there are pages here like page 9, 14, 18, 25, and 64. These are the pages where the evidence could be found. The next trait is loving, kind, or caring. Okay, the evidence. He thought that animals should not be hunted down unnecessarily. He cried when his grandpa killed a deer when he was 8 years old. Okay, this evidence could be found on page 15. Then the next one, when he noticed Hannah was crying after school, he asked her what had happened as someone had scrawled the word dirty hunt on her book. Number three, Richard spoke up for some students who did not want to sign the card for Hannah. Okay, it was signing the sympathy card after her parents' tavern was vandalized. So he told Mrs. Hansen that they wanted to sign but were afraid. Okay, Richard kept hoping that the war would end before Mr. Kilmer went to Europe. He was also worried that Gus might be killed in the war if he went after graduation. Next, Richard was also observant or perceptive. The evidence. Number one, Richard realized that Angie sacrificed a lot for his family. He took care of them after their mother died when he was 7. Okay, this is on page 14. Richard also observed his father having a sad, haunted look whenever he gazed across the prairie. He wondered what his father thought about. Richard has also the characteristic of being soft-hearted or is unwilling to kill. For example, evidence, as they were walking to look for their prey, Richard felt his gun as heavy as lead because he was hesitant to kill. As they quietly waited for a deer, Richard silently prayed that no deer would turn up to drink that day so that he would not have to kill it. He admitted to Pa that he did not have the heart to kill the buck he was supposed to, so he purposely missed. The next trait is assertive, firm, or rational. Okay, there are three evidence. So you have E1, evidence 1, evidence 2, and evidence 3. Okay, the first one, when Richard tried talking to his friends about what had happened to Hannah, he thought that others were being mean to Hannah. He did not change his mind, even though the other classmates talked bad about Hannah when because her parents were Germans. When Mrs. Hansen announced that the class should sign a card to show their support for Hannah, this happened when her parents' tavern was vandalized, Richard felt disgusted that his friends picked on Hannah and her family instead, because they accused them of being spies and singing German songs. Number 3, Richard could put himself in Hannah's place and thought of how he would feel if his family were picked on, so he bravely signed the card. Then the next one, characteristic of being brave, strong or courageous. Okay, there are many evidence here, so we have altogether 5. So number 1, Abner and Harry warned Richard against signing the card for Hannah, but he bravely signed his name on it. So this is showing bravery. After class, Richard asked for the card from Mrs. Hansen so he could deliver it himself, even though there were only one signature. Number 3, after school, Abner and Harry taunted him and started beating him, but he kicked Harry in the stomach and straddled across Abner. Number 4, after getting encouragement from Mr. Kilmer, Richard overcame his fear and informed his family his love for writing poems. Okay, the last evidence. After much encouragement from Mrs. Hansen, Richard read one of his poems in class and shared with them what Mr. Kilmer wrote. Okay, next, Richard is also obedient or a filial son. Okay, there are 2 evidence here, 1 and 2, and the next one, creative and talented, intelligent, also we have 2. So let's look at obedient. Richard did not want to lie to his father regarding why he missed the shot, so he told his father the truth. Number 2, Richard felt guilty for disappointing his pa for not able to shoot the deer. Okay, Richard was also creative, talented or intelligent because he wrote poems to express his feelings, but he locked them up in his drawer to prevent anyone from knowing. Richard came up with the idea of exchanging letters with the soldiers overseas so they would not feel lonely or homesick. And next, we also have characteristic of being thoughtful. Okay, evidence. As Richard walked home from school, he thought about picking some flowers for his sister to put on the table. Before Richard handed the card to Hannah, he wrote a kind message in it for Hannah and her parents. He apologized for what had happened and told them many people respected them and they were fine citizens. Next, Richard is also sociable. Richard had a famous poet, Gus Kilmer, as a pen pal. Okay, he exchanged a few letters with Mr. Kilmer when he was preparing for war. Next, we have also, when this is in blue, so it means that there are some negative characteristics or traits. So he was a bit hesitant or fearful. Okay, there are 3 evidence here. Number 1, Richard voiced his fear of telling people his love for poetry to Mr. Kilmer in his first letter. He feared it would become worse for him. Number 2, Richard asked Mr. Kilmer for opinion on what to do regarding his poems. He wondered if he should tell others about it or hide it from them. Number 3, he was nervous when he stood in front of his classmates to read his poem. His hand was shaking and his voice quivered. Now let's look at the second one. The second one is about Hannah Schrummer. Okay, she is 15 years old. She lives in Iowa. She's also in the 10th grade. She's physical description. She's very pretty. She has blue eyes or she is blue-eyed and she has blonde hair. Okay, let's look at her characteristic. She is thankful or grateful. Example. After being unkind to Richard, when Richard gave her the card, she apologized to him and praised him for being brave and kind. And she was also thankful there were neighbors who helped to paint over the awful words on the wall of the tavern. They promised to prevent it from happening again. Okay, she is also hopeful. She wanted the war to end immediately as her brother Otto had joined the American Expeditionary Forces, were American soldiers who went to Europe for war. Okay, so although his brother was a German, but he joined the American army. Okay, she was also worried about her brother. She believed that people should live peacefully without wars if everyone could learn to wish peace in their own hearts, so fewer people would die in vain. Okay, next we have the trait or the characteristic of being patriotic and also intelligent. So patriotic, there is one evidence here. So she did not stop her brother from joining the American Expeditionary Forces, as her brother was patriotic and he claimed it was the right thing to do. And then Hannah is also intelligent because, number one, she made a sensible suggestion to Richard on how to change the last line of his second poem he planned to send to Mr. Kilmer. And through her poem or her essay, Hannah voiced her opinion regarding the war. She said, peace must be made right in America. People must learn how to care for one another despite the differences. Okay, so you can see there are pages here indicating where you can find the evidence. Now let's look at Richard Knight, Mr. Knight or Pa. Okay, Pa is Richard's father and also Angie and Gus' father. He dropped out of school in grade 5. He's dark and brawny. He has a broad back and he is tall built. The first characteristic is 1. Okay, Pa, as they followed the creek to a pool where deer often came to drink, he checked the direction of the wind and looked for a place to hide. He also made sure that they placed themselves upwind of the pool so any deer that came to drink could not smell their presence. Okay, evidence number 3, even though Pa felt sad killing animals, he understood that in order to keep on surviving, he had to hunt. Okay, Pa is also understanding because when Richard missed shooting the deer, he justified by saying the deer was already bolting and Richard would not have made a clean kill. When Richard voiced out his thoughts about not wanting to kill animals, Pa gave him the permission not to hunt anymore. Okay, so this shows that Pa is under support. Because when they were at the cabin, he kept saying Richard would get his first deer the next day before they went hunting. And then Pa also wanted his boys to get an education for a better future. Next, Pa is also analytical because we could see that Richard purposely raised the rifle by a mere inch to avoid killing the buck. And Pa is also diligent. He is a diligent farmer like his father before him. He spent hours at his farm overseeing the farm hands and tending to the cattle. The negative trait of Pa is he's discouraging. Okay, there are 3 evidence. Number 1, when Richard told his father he wrote poetry, his father could not believe it. He asked if Richard were teasing him. He did not want to listen to any of Richard's poetry, but reminded Richard not to let it interfere with his chores or schoolwork. He also expected Richard to outgrow writing poetry as he thought it was just a temporary interest. Okay, now we move on to Gus Knight. Okay, Gus is Richard's older brother. He's the eldest. Okay, in the family. He's a terrific athlete. He loves hunting and playing games, and he is also popular in school. He always tried to fit in, unlike Richard. Okay, he's dark and brawny, and he is just like Pa. Let's look at Gus' characteristics. So he's brave or merciless. Okay, Gus killed his first buck when he was much younger than Richard, and he stated that he did not feel any guilt or sadness when he killed animals. Instead, it empowered him and made him feel like a man. Gus wanted to join the army and fight for his country. And Gus is also concerned or persuasive. After the shooting incident, Gus told Richard he had to learn to fit in with the other people and he was worried for him. He advised Richard to get into sports so he would get into good shape. Gus also persuaded Richard to try baseball as Richard has a strong throwing arm. These are negative characteristics. Gus is hot-headed or impulsive, stubborn, and also discouraging. Okay, let's look at the evidence. Number one, he was furious when Richard missed a shot and yelled at him without an ounce of patience. Okay, then when Pa told him to return to the cabin to pack up, he showed his annoyance by stomping away. He is also stubborn because Gus refused to let his brother shoot the buck. He wanted to kill it himself, but his Pa sternly stopped him, so he had to comply. Discouraging. Gus claimed that Mr. Kilmer was wasting his time on the small fry like Richard. He mentioned that he hated poetry and it was sissy stuff. He said he would deny Richard and his brother if he grew his hair long and curly. After dinner, he advised Richard not to go around school telling people he wrote poetry. He did not want Richard to pull another stunt, like signing the card for the Schrummers and become an oddball. Now, let's move on to Angie Knight. Okay, Angie is Richard's older sister. Okay, there's nothing much about her description in the novel. Let's look at Angie's characteristics. Okay, she's responsible and she sacrificed her life. Okay, evidence or elaboration. She took over her mother's role when her mother died when she was 9 years old. She spent her days storing and canning food, cooking, cleaning, washing clothes, and sewing. Angie also helped with the planting, harvesting, and caring for the livestock on their farm. And for sacrificing her life, Angie stopped school at 8th grade to help on the farm. She gave up her life to provide for her family. Mrs. Hansen. Well, Mrs. Hansen is an English teacher and she wore bifocals. Mrs. Hansen is responsible and also creative. Evidence. The school's only English teacher who was strict but obviously cared a lot about what she was teaching. At the beginning of the new school year, she announced that the school would put on a patriotic program to help sell Liberty bonds, which helped finance the war. She also suggested that the girl who wrote the best essay would play the role of Lady Liberty, while the boy with the best essay would be the doughboy. She also announced that she would post the 2 winners' essays in class for everyone to enjoy. Okay, she's also encouraging the evidence. Number one, we have 4 evidence here. So number one, despite the negative responses from her students, she encouraged them to sign the card for the Schrummers to show their sympathy. Mrs. Hansen smiled encouragingly when Richard offered to send the card to the Schrummers. She praised him for having some integrity. When she read Richard's poems, she had something nice to say about each one. She helped him choose one to send to Mr. Kilmer. She also encouraged Richard to share his poem with his class. Mrs. Hansen is also knowledgeable and concerned and kind. Let's look at knowledgeable. She informed the class that according to the New York Times, Mr. Kilmer had volunteered to fight in the war. Okay, and then she told the class about other great poets who stood up for things they believed in, like Lord Byron and Walt Whitman, who both fought in wars. Okay, she was also concerned or kind. There are 3 evidence. Okay, number one, when she heard that Hannah's parents' tavern was vandalized, she encouraged her class to sign a card for them to show their regret for the family. And when her students refused to sign the card, Mrs. Hansen defended Hannah's family, saying that they were upstanding members of the community and they had lived in the United States for many years. And the last one, she tried to get her students to sign the card but expressed her disappointment when Richard was the only one who signed it. And she's also regretful or felt disappointed. She was empathetic. So when Mrs. Hansen saw only one signature on the card, she expressed her disappointment and questioned why the students had no sympathy for those who deserve it. She decided not to send the card to the Schrummers as there was only one signature. Now let's look at Mr. Joyce Kilmer. Okay, Mr. Joyce Kilmer worked for the New York Times. He was a famous poet and he published a book, Trees and Other Poems. He is a father of 5 and was a sergeant in the American Armed Forces. Okay, let's look at his characteristics. He was brave, courageous, patriotic. He was also kind and caring. Okay, let's look at the first one for being brave. He volunteered for service in the army to fight for his country. Then he also admitted it was very hard to train to be a soldier. Although he was afraid, he had to overcome his fears. He believed in President Wilson's calling of the war to end wars. He volunteered to fight so young men would not need to fight and die in any more wars. Okay, he was also kind and caring because he wrote poems about living things. Next, he was also encouraging because there are 5 evidence here. He wrote to Richard and empathized with him. He encouraged Richard to be brave and to overcome his fears. He asked Richard to share his poems with those he knew. He also asked Richard to write to him again and send him one of his poems. Mr. Kilmer signed his letter to Richard as "Your Fellow Poet." This shows he acknowledged Richard's ability to write poetry and could identify with him. Mr. Kilmer told Richard his poems were very fine and impressive. He encouraged him to continue writing as he might become a published verse maker in future. He also claimed he enjoyed reading Richard's poems and letters. Okay, the next one is Abner, Louis and Harry Carver. Okay, they are classmates with Richard. Okay, let's look at. Okay, you can see here the characteristics are in blue. So these are negative characteristics. So they are proud or opinionated, and also they are mean or unkind and prejudiced. Okay, evidence. When Abner first heard Mr. Kilmer's poem, he said it was sissy stuff and claimed his father said poetry was for sissies. But he did not know that several poets fought in battlefields. Abner and his friend wrote Dirty Hunt on Hannah's book cover. He also claimed that they were Germans. Harry said that the Schrummers served sauerkraut in their tavern and it proved that they were unpatriotic as the war was ongoing. They disliked Richard for standing up for Hannah and confronted Richard when he was on his way to give Hannah the sympathy card. Okay, let's look at the word sauerkraut. Sauerkraut is finely cut raw cabbage that has been fermented by various lactic acid bacteria. Okay, so it's a dish served in the tavern. We are going to move on to the next character, who is Blanche Boat. Okay, she is a classmate with Richard and she is dark-haired. Now you can see that the characteristics are in blue, so this means that there are many negative characteristics. So first one, she's mean, unkind and prejudiced. Okay, let's look at the evidence. She declared that Germans were barbarians who had to be stopped or they would take over the world, and they cut people in two. She heard that the Schrummer spoke in German and thought they might be plotting something and did not want their neighbors to know. She did not like Hannah, who was a German. Okay, the next character is Peggy. Peggy is also Richard's classmate, and she's also dark-haired. Okay, you can see that these are negative characteristics, so she's snobbish and narrow-minded. She felt Millie was too mousy and bad-looking to play the role of Lady Liberty. Okay, then she's also narrow-minded because she felt that Hannah Schrummer would be a mockery to the patriotic idea if she were chosen, as she was viewed as a Hun.